Yeah. Hello.
Oh,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Just before we start, I'm so sorry, but I think your camera might be off.
Okay, just 1 second.
Right. Hi, Feroz. How are you?
Hi.
So, my name is Diksha, and I'm really excited to spend the next 30 minutes together. A session. This session particularly will give you a glimpse on how I'm going to structure my classes into effective classes. By and large, I heard, I read in the notes that this is the first time you've taken sociology as a subject.
Yeah.
Right. I have recently completed my bachelor's in sociology and I'm pursuing my master's. So I feel like I can guide you well in the subject. So before we start though, can you give me a little bit of background of like IGSC and all of the sociology curriculum that you guys are expected to do, and what has been enjoyable and what has been challenging?
No, it's actually my first time taking it, and we don't take it in school,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm taking it for my IGs,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. Yeah.
So have the classes started?
In school, still, it's going to start on 24th.
Okay, okay, great. And the book that you use, what's the serial number on that? Do you have an idea? I think it's like 495 or 500. It will be one of those probably. But okay, so by and large, since this is a very unique situation where we don't have a very particular sort of background or a list of chapters that we have to connect and convert with, so I'll just ask you a few questions here and there about general like teaching, etc., and you can answer, and then we can go about assessing like the knowledge and understanding of this subject, amorphous subject. So, by and large, what do you respond to well when it comes to teaching? Is it visual teaching? Is it note taking? Is it having lectures, etc., etc.?
I was like note taking,
Mm-hmm.
so that helps so much,
Okay, it
and
helps me as well. I'm a serial note taker myself.
I'm saying things in front.
Okay, okay, recitation. Okay. And are you comfortable with like recitation as a method? Like if I ask you questions like right out of the bat, right? So how I sort of structure my classes is if there's a 60-minute class, I'll keep the last 15 minutes or so for questions. So it's either going to be a question that I'll give you to write. The IGSE board will ask you a lot of essay questions, so it's nice to have the practice of like, okay, at least I can write, say, 100 words or 150 words in 15 minutes. That is the practice that you're going to have to get into. So, by and large, is it better for you to answer questions verbally or write them down?
Both. I'm fine with it.
You're fine with both. Great, great. And what are your expectations from me as a teacher?
To be honest, I have so much in teachers.
Yes. Okay.
Like I'm expecting the yeah.
Okay. So by and large, like good grades, right? That is the big umbrella answer for most people, right? That you just want to understand the subject that you're mostly unaware about, right? Okay, so this is again a little unique of a situation because since we don't have a set syllabus, we can only go off of learning the basics and things like that. So by the end of the session, I hope that we can understand what the ethos of sociology and what all we will sort of cover on so in the chapters and the subject will be. So by and large, when you hear the word sociology, what comes to mind?
Generation.
Could you just repeat one side?
Like generations.
Generation. Why do you think that is the word that comes to your mind?
Because it seems like how everyone in a generation acts and why they act like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, understood. So, by and large, let me just share my screen. Give me a second. Right, here I am. So, sociology, by and large, is a very interesting word to choose and a very interesting reason as well. Generation as a word is covered under the subject of youth and aging and other by subjects of sociology. So, sociology, in its very basic sense, and the definition that will be given to you, is the study of society. So, by and large, it will cover topics of introspection that will range from history, from political science, from anthropology, all of the rest of the humanities subjects will be under the sociology umbrella to some degree or the other. Specifically, sociology will have or will be split into probably two parts. One will be your basic concepts, which will be covering concepts like family, institutions like education, things that we encounter every single day, and the other part of sociology will be your theory, and this is all of the work, all of the writings that were, philosophized and written down a long time ago by sociologists. So this is your basic Marx, Durkheim, and Weber. So I'll actually not get into all of this today. It will be a very futile class if we do this, because again, we need to have a concept of sociology to understand why this subject is the way it is. So when we think about, and I'd love if you interact a lot in this class, because I'd love to hear your insights as well. Sociology is based on, like, the entirety of it is on discourse. Discourse is the dialogue between two people. So talk, interrupt me, say your own like interpretations, whatever you wish to do, right? Because that is how sociology as a subject is also developed. So a long time ago, like during the 17th century, 16th century, 17th century, during the French Revolution, I'm sure you have an idea of what the French Revolution is, right? Right. During the French Revolution, the masters of art, the masters of science, were going through a period called the Enlightenment. Have you ever heard of the word enlightenment?
And to be honest,
So the Enlightenment period is marked by a time where you have empirical knowledge. This is another word. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to make you comfortable with words like this, because in completely functionally, if we look at the subject sociology and how you're going to be marked, it will be based on the terminology you can inculcate or use into your answers, into your writings, etc. So get comfortable with words like these, okay? So empirical means fact based, okay? So the Enlightenment period was a time in history. It happened right after the Renaissance. It happened at the time of like Michelangelo drawing the Sistine Chapel, and the David, son of David, being created, the paintings that we love so much and we revere a lot. Um, Science became a very important part of society. So we had people like Newton coming up with physics, right? And physics and his theory of gravity was in complete opposition to the church. Okay, so the church believed a certain that the earth and the way the earth was shaped and all of the phenomenons of the earth existed because of their conception of God. Newton had come in and he had said that no, these are the three laws of the of the physical world, and this is how the physical world can be studied. Then you had Copernicus. Copernicus was a astrologist who had, or not an astrologist, so sorry, an astronomer who had observed that the sun actually did not revolve around the earth, but the earth revolved around the sun. So there were all of these scientific ideas that were coming through, that were being born in society. Another very important thing is, one second, can you read this word? Anatomical. Anatomical basically means the body, right? So, do you know the history of how anatomical studies is born in medical science? So what happens is the church, and this is all happening in Europe. Okay, so we have to understand the context of the church and the clergy. So in Europe, the Bible basically was the formative text on which society was sort of distributed. Okay, so the clergy or the church, as we have read in French Revolution, right? There were the three estates. The clergy was at the top, right? And the clergy dictated how society was organized. Okay, so one of the things that they said was that you could not touch a dead body after it had died, right? But we know that medical and medicine had been born out of dissections, right? So you would have these public galleries, these big showings in auditoriums where one very experienced surgeon would be sitting there with a scalpel, knife, and they would show you, okay, this is the nervous system, this is the circular system, this is how the organs work, etc., etc. And the entirety of society was becoming extremely science oriented. They were starting to question the doctrine that they had learned from the church that was told to them. This is the time where also, because of the French Revolution, there is a lot of tension that is being, brewed between the clergy, the second estate, and the third estate. Because the third estate, which is the majority people, right, it is mostly made up of people, the common people who were in the millions, as compared to the clergy and the nobility, who were 1% or 2% of that population. They were starting to become resentful. They were starting to become angry at the people that had basically put in this system where they would be taxed to hell. They would have to give up all of their earnings, etc., etc. They would have to go to war. They would not have subsidized anything to survive. So they felt abandoned by the church and the nobility, and therefore they retaliated with a revolution, right? We have these incredible, like, records of how organized the French Revolution was. The storming of the Bastille was. The Bastille was a prison that was stormed once the French Revolution had commenced, because people back then, to curb the revolution, to stop the revolution, the King of France, Louis XVI, decided to convict people or throw people into jail and execute them without any reason. So why I'm explaining all of this is the background in which sociology as a subject is born. Okay, so even though we think that, okay, because it is a social science subject, it might not be very scientific, there is a lot of battle that happens within the subject itself, with certain people having the belief, or it being born out of this immense history of science and empirical knowledge versus our generalized beliefs of society, right? We all have common sense, right? We all operate on common sense, right? We all have our intuitions that this is dangerous, this is not dangerous, this is good, this will be beneficial, that is wrong, etc., etc. Sociology will ask you on the first day to disregard that sense that you have. It will ask you to look at the world through observations. How do you think about, or how do you decode a certain very abstract thing like family, right? Family is something that we are all a part of, right? I have a mom, I have a dad, I have a brother. That is my nuclear family unit, right? If somebody says something bad about them, right, if somebody says like something that is oppressive towards them, I might feel offended, right? But sociology is going to ask you to not feel offended, to not be biased, but to examine all of these structures, all of these big sort of words that we use in our everyday life into smaller concepts that make sense to us. Okay, so just like we learned Newtonian physics, right? What are the very basic tenets of Newtonian physics? The most simplest things, right? That if you drop something, it falls down because gravity attracts it. If you push something, it moves. That is the most basic interpretation of the three laws that Newton had written, right? If you have motion onto something, something will change, right? So all of these things, all of the like big concepts that we break down into small pieces, that is the method of how we go about learning sociology or any humanities subject at your level. Okay, because it is all of it is based off of this French Revolution and this period of enlightenment where empiricism, rationalism, rationality, the way we reason with ourselves, that okay, maybe I don't want to do this, what is the reason that I don't want to do this, I'll ask myself. That rationality is the most important in our society and in our study, in our discipline. Okay. Okay, so I've been talking a lot. I just tried to give you like an understanding of what the subject will be like. So, by and large, do you have any questions at all, like about anything that you might be covering in the subject, anything regarding the history of the subject, like any curiosity? Like, is there any sort of curiosity that you're having about the subject after learning the history of it? Any questions that you feel like are coming into your mind that involve the subject?
I want to know, yani, the structure of the exams. How will I be like getting
Mm-hmm.
asked the questions? How will I be answering it? Are there gonna be a lot of writing, or is
Mm-hmm.
there gonna be also MCQs?
Mm-hmm. I think there will be a lot of writing, in the sense where I think you guys will get like POQs, which is basically essay questions. So you might get, say, an excerpt, right? Say for example, coffee, right? Something that we consume every single day, right? And you might get a rhetoric about coffee or some sort of quote about coffee. Say for example, the concept or the production of coffee is much deeper than just the consumption of it. And just some sort of line, through line, and then you might be asked to weigh in or sociologically examine the process of how coffee comes at your door, or how it is or is a part of a social process or a social diaspora. Diaspora is basically a web. Okay, just imagine a web that is connecting everything. So by and large, it's a very bad drawing of a web, but regardless. So think about it, right? If I take the concept of coffee, right? Essay questions will often ask you to utilize something called sociological imagination. Okay. It basically means that you're going to be asked to, Firoz, I hope you're there.
Yeah, Nadia.
Okay. Um, it will be asking you to look at the very mundane task of drinking a coffee, but looking at it in a lens where you examine all parts of this process. So let's look at how coffee is planted and how it is um, arriving at your doorstep, right? So the first thing we can look at sociologically is, say, for example, you have the concept of freely sourced or ethically sourced. I hope I don't know if you've ever heard this, right? Ethically sourced coffee, ethically sourced sugar cane, etc., etc. Because ethically sourced diamonds, we have this huge debate about like black diamonds and this whole entire enterprise that we often learn about. So the first thing that you can sort of look at is how coffee and coffee production is very ethically challenged. Ethically means you're morally challenged, because most people that are involved in coffee production often utilize child labor. They utilize unethical practices. They do not pay fair wages to their workers. And because coffee production is what, it's basically built into the indigenous populations of places, right? Places where these places are not that developed, these places are not that like modern, right? So the people of these places who work on these fields, they are mistreated, they are not paid well. So you have this entire concept of, okay, your ethics of where you get your, say, Nestle packet of coffee, or whatever packet of coffee you're going to dissolve into water and drink, where does that come from? How do you track that process? Next, you can look at coffee as an institution. You can think about, okay, I inculcate caffeine into my everyday life because maybe it is something that I've seen my parents do every day. So it is something, say, for example, for me, it's tea, right? In our household, every day in the morning, I would get, I would see my dad drinking a cup of tea, Darjeeling tea, right? So I can inculcate that into my answer. It's this process is called socialization. It is when you learn behaviors from other people. So maybe even media, right, socializes you to eh, have images of coffee and coffee production and coffee drinking as something that is aesthetic, as something that is desirable. We often see Starbucks and Starbucks ads, etc., all of the small coffee shops with decors and photo places, etc., etc. So you can also think about caffeine production as, or caffeine consumption as a part of our socialization. On the flip side, you can also see the addiction that somebody might get from caffeine, right? So the sort of belief that there are gateway drugs, right? Drugs that you take which lead you to having a susceptibility to, or a, what's the word, it's as the word says, it's a gateway, right? That if you do this thing, you might be more prone to doing that other thing. So we can see that addictions are born out of harmless behavior, and caffeine is so normal in everyday life, right? Normal as a thing to consume, that maybe it allows for addiction behavior to go unchecked, right? Whereas something else, a harmful substance or a more harmful substance like alcohol, is clocked immediately. It is socially unacceptable. Caffeine addictions are socially acceptable. So you can look at that. and any sort of personal reflection that you might have. So, see how I took something as simple as coffee drinking, and how, in say, the concept of an essay question, which is an introduction, the your introduction, your three paragraphs of body, and then conclusion, you made a complete sociological evaluation of how coffee as a subject is very, what's the word, it's very complicated, right? This is a very fringe example, okay, but this is the way your essay questions are going to be formed. These the example that I'm using is, again, very fringe. It might not even come up as something. The student that I taught you, that I taught before you, they had questions about education, formal education, informal education. What is the sort of worth of, having racism within education, educational institutions like schools, etc. How do they treat people differently? How do they treat girls versus boys? How do they treat a racially black person than a racially white person, etc., etc.? Those were the questions that we encountered and we solved. But by and large, since this is the first time you're going to be confronting sociology, this is the type of question you can get. Or another type that is very common is the explain the theory of, which is basically, you're going to be asked to explain the theory of